Um, yeah, what do you want to share your screen?
Yeah, great.
Okay,
So let me. Um, so I am sharing my screen. Let me know if that works out.
there we go.
Great, excellent. All right, so we're gonna do a couple of things here. I have a project that I usually do for demoing purposes. It's called JFormat. So I'm actually activated in a virtual environment, but let me reset that so that we're kind of like more like even more bare bones than anything. And I'm gonna do a Git reset here. Going to go to the master branch. This is already on GitHub, by the way. So if you guys want to check out the GitHub project, it's git remote-v. So it's Alfredo Deza / JFormat. That'll get you to the project, and I'm in the main branch, master in this case, and let's poke around. There's a bunch of different things here. So if we do that, so there's a lot of things here. So you might be wondering, like, what are all of these different weird files? So that's a lot of what Python does behind the scenes, which is adding these PYC files, which are cached stuff from the interpreter. So in essence, we have a couple of files here. We have one directory called jformat, and then we have a dunder-init.py, and we have a main.py and a reformat file. These are the three important files here, and then we have some tests, and nothing weird about that. We're gonna run them in a second. So the idea here is that you start with a bare bones project. You have this thing, you want to package it. Packaging is usually very tricky, very obtuse in Python. So let's take a look at, like, let's start at the very top. I'm going to list the top directory. I'm going to actually remove this guy so that this is the egg info. The egg info is a thing that the Python does for packaging as well, but let's remove it. And here we have a bunch of different files. We have a license file, nothing weird about that. It's just saying what type of project this is, what's the license. This is MIT. I want to list this again.
So you're basically what you're showing people is if they were going to create a new project from, let's say, zero from scratch, and they wanted to set up some tests and then maybe later upload it to the Python package index,
Yeah.
then it would do what you're about to show them.
Yeah, exactly. So you have these all of these files laying around, and possibly even less or different ones. So you start with a directory. So in this case, I usually have the convention of naming the directory the same name as my package. So in this case, JFormat is my package name. And then the idea here is that you have this special file called setup.py. So let's take a look at setup.py. And we open it, and then it has some instructions and some imports that are useful. In this case, it's importing from setup tools. It's importing setup and find packages. And then he starts explaining a little bit. It's kind of like defining what this project is. This is the JFormat project. I put the version in there. This is useful because if you're gonna package these and upload it to the Python package index, then you can install different versions, and your users might want, I want version 0.2, 0.1 didn't have the feature that I wanted, and so on and so forth. So it's basically metadata, the author, your email, and then you have all of these extras that are you can go deep into, like, what do they mean, but they're not necessarily super useful to understand to actually create a package. So this is very important. Once you have that, you're good to go. And again, this is up on GitHub if you want to check it out and do some copy paste and try it out. This should get you a good package. So before going any further, let's create a virtual environment. That way we're isolated from the system dependencies. And we're gonna do with Python 3. So we're gonna do Python 3 -m VM. That will call the virtual environment module from Python 3. And let's follow Noah's convention of putting JFormat the project in your home directory. So this is a good convention to have. Then these projects will be hidden in my home directory, and I can just activate from there. So let's execute that. Wait until finish, and now we're gonna activate it. And then activating that means that my Python has changed. You can see that there's a JFormat under parens there. So now if I do which Python, that points somewhere else, which is good. That means that we're isolated. We can install stuff. So we have this settle.py file, and what this will allow us to do is we're gonna be able to execute it. So if we do Python settle.py, that should get us a bunch of help menus. So this is pretty cool because it's hooking into Python's packaging tooling, and it's allowing us to do a bunch of different things there. So we can actually go and say, well, I want some help here, and it has a bunch of different things that you can do, and you can actually interact with the packaging utilities that this thing has. So that's pretty cool. But sometimes it's kind of daunting because it has so many options that, like, all we want to do here really is to create a package. So we're gonna try a couple ones, but I'm gonna start with build. If everything goes well, build will produce a package, and it will create a build directory, and it'll place our package there. So let's try that. So Python settle.py build. Let's see what happens. So a bunch of information coming into the terminal, and let's go into build and see what's going on in there. So inside of build we have lib, and like it will just actually copy everything that my whole project will be copied over there. A little bit weird, but the important thing is that it has a script. So if we go to scripts, and it does a -38 because that's the Python, I think is Python 3.8. If I do, it has an executable. So now that executable is actually my script. We can take a quick look at it, and look at that. It does all of these things for me. And it will be able to run this and execute it, and it'll just work.
Yeah, that's an interesting, the whole command line tool entry point, is an interesting thing for Python, where, I wonder, when I look at the way they do command line tools, if there isn't a lot of legacy stuff in there that's like, like, do we need to do this? Like,
Yeah.
For like, one of the things I think that's more of just a thought experiment is that if you look at the that script that's generated, why is it that it imports that library and then just puts a couple lines of code into a script? Like, if it's going to do all that work for you, and the script itself actually could be changed, right? Like, somebody could go into that JFormat and just be like, yeah, I'm going to put, so like, if you're doing all that extra work, why wouldn't you just make like a binary that was portable instead?
Yeah.
Like, if you're going to go ahead and create some kind of a script, either don't do that, just, like, have a file called script and it's got all the code in there, or actually create an executable that is read only, portable, like Go. And so I wonder if that's actually something where, it's easy if you've been using Python for 30 years or something, and you're just like, oh yeah, this is the way we always did it.
Yeah.
But I wonder if there's things like that where you could really kind of change the game a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I don't know. What do you think?
I really like what Go how Go does this, and it allows you to spit out an executable, and it works everywhere and anywhere. Like it doesn't you don't need anything else, and that's really neat. And but the thing is that they really focused on that when they were creating the language. Like that was one of the core things that they wanted, be able to make it super easy to get out command line tools. Python is not like that, unfortunately, and yes, we're dealing with a bunch of different funkiness. And I am just showing setup.py, and there's actually I think there's 4 different ways to do this, and setup.py is just one. There's setup.cfg. I think there are some other tools that use toml, which is like the configuration style of kind of like Markdown or YAML. And it's just there's so many ways, and there's so many ways and so many different tools, and that should signal like why is that? And it's because Python packaging is very, very complicated.
And then there was also, wasn't there at one point there was eggs from like
which are zip files.
Like there was like so yeah, the in particular, the worst part of the Python language probably
is packaging.
Is probably the packaging is really not great.
It's not great. Yeah, it's really tough. It's really difficult. My hope is that the Python community stops producing more tooling and actually concentrates in fixing the problem, which it's a it's a pretty big problem. The ecosystem is super large. All right, so we saw a way to build, but like that doesn't do much for us other than just copy some files around. But one thing, like this thing produces an executable, and if I do, which is called JFormat, and right now it picks this one up. But that, like, if I wanted to make sure that we're basically doing the right thing here, and we're modifying some files and picking that up, you could do Python setup.py develop, and that would install all of the dependencies in the library itself inside the virtual environment. So you can see here it creates the egg link and a bunch of other packaging information. The only thing that this is doing, I mean, the output might be a little bit scary. It has a bunch of different things there. I don't even, like, I've been working with Python so many years, and I still, like, sometimes I just get so confused about how many different files there is. But all this allows us to do is to be able to run the tool and be able to modify the files. So if I go to bin here, I can say print here in dx. Well, this is not gonna work. Actually, this is the script that actually builds everything. So if I go into a project and I go into say main.py, there's a bunch of utilities. And I'll show you what this is actually doing. But if I go, this is the command line parser, and I can say format JSON files. This is modified, and I right quit that. This is the main function. So if I do JFormat and then I run the help, look at that. So it's picking up. All that you need to know is that this is the Python setup.py develop allows me to modify files in my project, and the executable just picks them up. So this is a really useful way to develop your project, because it allows you to hook into a little bit of the awkwardness of Python's packaging, but to your benefit, you can format. So this is basically formatting JSON files. And I have some examples here. I mean, this is not super useful, but if I go into example.json, it's this weirdly formatted JSON file. So the idea is that you can do JFormat and you pass the input. Oops. I think this takes it. Let's look at the help menu here. So we can pass -- file, which is an argument, and we can say example.json, and there we go. You have a nicely formatted output. So that's pretty cool. And again, that you get that with Python setup.pydevelop. Now, next in line is we have this JFormat stuff, and I usually like to have my tests directory in here. I'm going to do PyClean. I'm going to do tree so you can see the kind of like the structure. So JFormat is the directory. You have an init.py, which signals this is a module. Then you have main. That's where I put my. And this, a lot of these things are convention. Main.py, like you don't really need to have things on main.py, but like I usually like to put stuff in there. And then in it, again, that just signals Python. It's like, oh, this is actually a module. If I didn't have these, things wouldn't work. And I think this is empty. Yeah, it's empty. So actually, why don't we do that? Let's remove this thing and see what happens if I run JFormat. JFormat, or like this. Now, I wonder why. I wonder why that's working. That should not work. Probably like because files have been moving around. But actually, we have some tests. So I'm going to install PyTest and try to run PyTest here, and then it finds a couple of tests there. It runs them. Everything's good. A good thing that to be able to hook into a bunch of different things that you may have in a Python package. So if we go back to JFormat and we do tree, let me remove these PYC files. So now that you have these things, then you see that tests are in here, and PyTest is picking them up. PyTest is a test runner and a test framework. We're able to kind of like have some structure. Now, you don't need to have your tests inside your Python package. They could very well be outside. I just prefer to have them in here. I think it simplifies things. I like to package everything with tests. I think it's a good idea. People can actually take a look at those and see how they work and run them kind of like what I did.
If you're using PyTest, you don't need to do the init.py. Is that correct?
I think yes. I think it really depends on how you're structuring your tests, but we can go ahead and remove it. Well, actually, let me see if it's empty. Sometimes there's stuff in there. Yeah, so it's empty. So if we do init.py and then I run PyTest, yeah, it actually runs. So PyTest will figure out where those tests are getting executed, and I'll figure it out for you, which is pretty useful.
Since I use PyTest, I just don't ever put an init.py.
Yeah, it's not strictly necessary. It can get a little bit weird if it's inside your module, and if the import paths are messed up, then by using the under init, like you can help PyTest a little bit. So if you're clean and doing things the right way, like Noah, then it will work, no problem.
You know what I've also noticed I see a lot is when people, the first time, let's say that someone's got 1 or 2 years experience with programming in Python, and they're starting to use libraries or create their own library. Can you guess what the first thing that I see is?
The first thing.
Yeah. So like if I'm working, I hire, when I was like a CTO or engineering manager, or or a professor, right? I'm teaching people stuff, and then someone is getting beyond beginning stage and they go to intermediate, and then they're showing me some code that they wrote, and they're like, hey, yeah, look, I heard about this thing called a library, and I'm going to make a library. And I would say 99% of the time, they don't just make a directory with some files in there and import it. The directory has got massive nesting of layers inside, and there'll be like a directory, and then there'll be 3 directories below, and then there'll be below 3, there'll be another. And I'm like, and I just remember like the first time, like maybe like 10 years ago or something, I saw someone do this. I was like, whoa, what are you doing? Like, why? And they're like, oh no, it makes it easier. And I said, but every time you import your library, something's broken. So I don't think it's easier. I think there's something very bad about nesting the stuff. And then what I tell them is I say, and actually, let's try this out. Let's play around with this multi code thing. Let me highlight mine for a second.
Mm-hmm.
Is
Yeah.
is I do this? Like, let's say I go through here. I create a virtual environment, and let's call this VMV. And let's say I want to source this thing. This is what I always tell people is, so let's say pip install Ipython. Maybe it's a little bit bigger. And what I tell them is they're like, no, this is way better. This is way better, right? I don't know why Ipython is not working. Let's just use Python and say import this. Right. That's the first thing that I show them. I say, look, hey, by the way, did you know about this? And then most of the time, the people that are nesting the giant stuff, they've never seen this. Well, maybe the people that wrote Python know something, and let's read this. And then it says simple is better than complex, and then complex is better than complicated, and flat is better than nested. So is it possible you're ignoring the Zen of Python? and a lot of times I think there's silence. So anyway, that's just something that I've been encountering when I see people.
Yeah, it's just so easy to get try to get ahead of yourself and try to make nifty things. I think like to keep things like super simple, like really like we only have a couple of files there. Well, I mean, don't get distracted with the PYC, but just a couple of files and you have like a really good utility that allows you to do a bunch of things. So a few years ago, Python transitioned from Python 2 to Python 3, and that was kind of painful. And then there was a lot of the command line tools and library authors were struggling to like, here I'm using, I think it's Python 3.8. Yeah, so I'm using Python 3.8, and they wanted to test different Python versions. And they were like, oh man, this is getting tricky because we have Python 2, Python 3, and we want to make sure all of these things work. So the guys that wrote PyTest actually came out with docs, which is a really nice tool. And I have a docs file here, and I'll show you how it looks, and then we'll run it and what it entails. So the idea here is that you can define a bunch of different things. It has like at the very top, it has the environment list. It has Py27, Py35, and 3.6 and 3.7. So what it does behind the scenes is it'll grab each one of these things and it will create a separate virtual environment for each, and it will install the library and it'll run whatever I tell it to run. So in this case, that comes from testenv. And it says like the dependency is PyTest, and then I'm gonna run PyTest on all of them, and that should tell me what's going on. And aside from that, I usually like to use a linter, and you can use whatever you want, but in this case I'm using Flake8. So aside from that, it will create another virtual environment, install Flake8, install my library, and then run it, and it'll give me results. And here I'm ignoring a couple of things. So
the since I've never really used talks, but the concept looks pretty cool. Do you have to have? I'm assuming you have to have those interpreters available.
Well, so that's an excellent question. So I have these skip missing interpreters. So sometimes I run this in Jenkins, and Jenkins might not have 3.5 and might have 3.7 only. And so say for example, let's do let's make these let's make these fail. So let's do Py39, which hasn't been released, and let's see what happens. I'm gonna run that. I'm gonna just, if I just do, well, I don't think I have docs in here, so I'm gonna install docs.
Wow, that's so you just installed docs.
Yeah, and then I run it like just by doing docs. So as long as there's a docs ini in the top level directory, I can just do talks. I'm going to run it. I'm going to get a bunch of outputs. So it's going to go and say, well, I'm going to run setup.py. Look at that. So this is Python 2.7. This is pretty fantastic. See those errors? That's because, remember, I removed the dunder init. So this thing is not able to import main because I remember I ran JFormat and it worked. And I was like, oh, why is that working? Because I removed. So these are things that actually docs will catch. And this is very useful because it's, now I've removed something. It kind of works on my environment. This is perfect. It kind of works on my environment. However, like I didn't realize. So I could have very well released these to the wild, and then people are installing this tool and they're like, man, like this doesn't work. Like what's going on? It's like, what do you mean? Like my tests pass. If I run PyTest, it just like, look at that. It passes. Like, how is that possible? Well, that's possible because I have installed it in this local environment and it works.
I see. So it just has to, I'm just guessing here, but it seems like the shenanigans that could happen
with packaging
Python with talks could be just tremendous.
Talks actually grabs what you have and installs it in a brand new virtual environment. So if you have dependencies, it's like, say I have a dependency here and I'm importing some like let's actually go through that exercise. Let me install Flask. This is not a web API, but like doesn't matter. Let me install Flask, which is a web framework, and let's go inside my code here, and then go into main.py and install Flask, right? Or import Flask. I'm gonna say here, this should break in production. Import Flask, right? But that, like, if I run that directly, well, it's an import error. But like that should not, like if I go and do PyTest, everything passes. How is that possible? Because I'm importing Flask, and that's because like I install Flask, but I haven't declared Flask as a dependency. So if I run talks, and you can specify, like instead of running every single environment, you can specify the environment. If I do py27, this should bomb because I have not declared Flask as a dependency. So let's run talks in Python 2.7, and let's see what happens. Well, let's actually go and fix that error. So that the first error is that I removed the dunder init, and it's just breaking the package, so it can't even get to the import. So I'm gonna do JFormat dunder init .py. All right, let's try talks again. And now it should complain, hey, you know, Flask, like what's going on? That's not good. There we go. So you get an import error. And why do you get an import error? Because Flask is not declared as a dependency in my package, because this thing is actually running Python setup.py install into the virtual environment, and I haven't declared Flask. So if I were to go into setup.py and say, I think it's dependencies or requirements, dependencies. I haven't done this in like 100 years, but we can try that and see if that works. We can try it really quickly and see if that picks it up. No, it didn't. Yeah, unknown distribution. I don't remember. Can you believe I don't remember what is it that I need to do? Do you remember, Noah?
Couldn't you just use the requirements file? Or
I think. Well, I think that for setup.py that like I would still need to know what the it's not dependencies. It's either requirements. Let's try one more time, and otherwise we can move on. Requires. Isn't it requires?
You could do install requires. Yeah, install _ requires.
Look at that. Very well. I haven't done this in 100 years. So if I do Python setup.py develop, there we go. Yeah. So now if I run talks again, it should pass, because and you'll see it'll pick pick those changes from Flask, and it will pick them up. It didn't for some reason. Interesting. So again, this is just signifying that like I'm declaring my dependencies and not doing it correctly. If we go spelunking inside here, you see that look at those. All of those directories are virtual environments. If you do Py27, look at that. It's a virtual environment. You can say it has the Python 2.7. It creates everything for you. It's curious though, because I don't know why I didn't catch that I did the changes in Serala.py that should have caught that. I don't know. Flask with an uppercase? I don't know. Or is the if I'm
just Flask even works with Python 2.7 anymore.
Oh, interesting. Oh, that's a good one.
I mean, I thought it's at one point that the person that wrote Flask was not happy with Python 3. so maybe it does work. So I don't know.
Yeah. Well, let's try docs Py36 and see what happens. That's a good point. I think it should have. Yeah, I should have.
Okay, so
it should have caught that. I don't know why it doesn't like it. But if we go to Serala.py, then the idea is that you install, like you put your stuff in there, so things should just work. So if I go here, oops, I go there, remove Flask. So now you have these file, and then we have, I didn't show the linting. Well, that no, if I do Py360, that should just work because I removed the offending
import.
The offending import. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so you get a congratulations. Everything just works.
So is Tox as well? Is it who wrote it? Is it
Holger Krekel and the rest of the guys? I mean, it wasn't Holger Krekel alone, but it was Holger again with the other guys that.
It seems like a tool. If I had to summarize, since I've never used it, is that it's a tool, or I've never used it intentionally. If you're developing libraries and you use the PyTest framework, it seems like a great tool.
Yeah, and then you can hook any kind of thing. So we can do Flake because I declared it as an environment, and then you can run Flake8. So this is just going to, again, create a virtual environment just for Flake8, install Flake8, and run your stuff. So here we got a bunch of, look at that, a bunch of offending stuff. We've imported OS but didn't use it.
But the virtual environment, though, which Python
you can define that, but this is just using the default, which is the one that I'm using right now, which is 3.8.3. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that's right. So
interesting.
Yeah, so that's pretty useful, and actually Tox is pretty useful for CI/CD environments, because then it's almost like a makefile but for Python environments, and it also has the ability to create these matrices. So if I do tox-l, it has like a special syntax that allows you to explode. It tells you all of these environments, but and we were about to show what happens with if I do an environment like that doesn't have a corresponding Python version. It will say, hey, I skipped it because I couldn't find Python 3.9, which is useful if you're testing everything. But Tox has the ability to do a bunch of different things. So I could do.
Too bad you can't tell it if it's missing install Python 3.9.
Yeah. So I think you can do these 3, 4. Think you can do these. So you have this special syntax that allows you to explode that, and hopefully I'm getting it right. The idea is that, yeah, there you go. So you can build very powerful combinatorial matrices that allow you to explode how you're testing. So for example, and this is just a flat combination, but it starts getting interesting if you want to do very highly functional tests, and you want to say, oh, I want to test this, but I'm doing functional tests with Docker, and I want to test Docker version 1.2 and 1.3. So you could like, if that adds another dimension, so you could do Python 2.7 and Docker 1.2 and 1.3, and same with Python. So you start getting really interesting combinations that allows you to, like, with very little things. So like you could do, for example, here, this is a fake combination, but we can say 1.2 and 1.3, and let's see what that gives us. Like what will that produce? If I do -L, which is basically list all of the environments, all of the combinations possible, look at that. So it goes and it creates the combination for you. So this is tremendously powerful, and you can go even beyond. Say, I want to do Docker 1.2 and PostgreSQL, 9.1, and I swear I've done this. I've done this in production. There's a lot of stuff that I've done in production where I'm using talks along with PyTest and functional tests and Docker, and talking to the Docker API and doing all kinds of things. And this makes it possible. And so, like, again, Flake8 allows me to see. This is another useful thing, is that, like, if I don't have Flake8, it will install it for me in the virtual environment, but I have to actually declare. Here you can see deps equal Flake8. So if I don't have this line, if I comment this out and I run, I'm gonna run it from scratch, which is with E, and I'm gonna say Flake8. It will complain saying, hey, you told me to run Flake8, but you didn't, like, this. Your project doesn't specify Flake8 as a dependency, and there we go. And you didn't tell me to install it, so it fails. So again, I think this is pretty useful stuff for Python stuff. So again, setup.py, you can do Python setup.py develop to develop on the fly, setup.py install to, if you really want to install it, and build to build the thing that you're actually going to be able to upload to the Python package index. The setup.py can be as easy or as complicated as you want. I think this is almost to the bare minimum. I mean, perhaps we can remove a couple of things here. You have a directory that looks kind of simple, and then you have some tests there, a couple of files, and then you're good to go. And Docs allows you to have a nice test matrix and just run it and use it in your CI/CD.
So it seems like it works pretty well if you were going to test microservices, I bet. Because like, let's say the two things that I keep running into that are irritating are, still occasionally, not as much, but I'll run into Python 2 prints, which is irritating. Yeah. But that's kind of almost gone away because nobody uses Python 2. But the one that's really irritating that I get all the time is Python 3.5, Python 3.6. It's like, oh God. It's so frustrating because I only use F strings, and then occasionally people are using Python 3.5, and it's like everything breaks with Python 3.5.
Yeah, that's right. The F strings it's a pretty good one. So actually, let's try that. Let's try. You said 3.5 and 3.6, right?
Yeah, that's the breaking changes between 3.5 and 3.6.
So if we do that, we're gonna remove Python 2.7 to make it expedient. And let's add JFormat, and we're gonna add some let's add some F strings here. So if we go, this is the parser. We're gonna say print f strings. Let's do that to print the arguments on the command line. So that should work in Python 3. Let's see, J format help 3.8 should, yeah. There we go. So that gives me the f string. So let's see with docs what happens. I'm gonna do -r so that it removes all of the virtual environments and gets them back in again. Let's see what happens. So it doesn't find 3.4. It's building now 3.5. Look at that. So 3.5 tells me there's a syntax error. It catches that and complains. And 3.6 succeeds. So there you go. So that's how you can tell. Yeah, if you're introducing stuff.
Yeah, and then, sorry, one other thing I see is that the Python Black module, which I is starting to use more and more, it's pretty useful to format code. It doesn't work with Python 3.5 as well. So same thing, like I'm working somewhere and then I do like a pip install Python Black, boom, everything blows up.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen that one. Like maybe we can show people the Black tool.
Yeah. Let's actually do that and we'll see how it reformats. So I'm using Python 3.8 in this virtual environment, so that's why this will probably work fine.
And I'm a huge fan of these formatting tools because I cannot tell you how many times you're working at a company over the last 20 years and then someone's like, hey, in Perl, we did it like this. So that's what we should do it. It's like, no, there's a rule book. Just follow the rules. Quit making your own rules.
Exactly. So if when I use the power of Git here, some main.py is untouched. Let's run Black and see how it. There we go. So now let's take a look at the differences. So there you go. Look at that. It added a bunch of new lines. It changed my. I guess this is one. Being opinionated is very good, and I'm not gonna take that away from Black, but I personally prefer single quotes, and here it just changes everything to double quotes. So it starts changing stuff like that. Again, single quotes and double quotes. There it changes. Look at that. The parser, the argument parser call, it changes to just use a single line, and it changes the single quotes to double quotes. So yeah, so it does a bunch of different things for you. So that's pretty useful.
As I've gotten older, you that's one of the advantages is you just don't care about certain things anymore.
Yeah,
like I
it doesn't
really
matter.
Don't care about single quotes or double
consistency.
quotes.
Let's do consistency and let's just move forward, right?
I'm just lazy. Like it's almost like getting a post on Facebook. They're like, "Oh, QAnon, great, I believe it." It's like the same thing. Just give me it. Conspiracy theory, I'll take it. Like that's what Black is. It's like it's like basically like conspiracy theories for your Python code.
Well, that's it. I hope you guys find this useful. I think Python packaging is complicated enough that it warrants look into tools like Tox and Tox-ini that allows you to test in different Python versions. Thank you so much.